1.0 Introduction to Chemistry. Do these cookies look delicious? Cooking and baking is one way that you may have experienced chemistry in your daily life. Baking powder and baking soda are both chemicals that undergo a reaction during the baking process to produce carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is responsible for the familiar rising of cookies and cakes. Of course, you know that it is very important to follow a recipe carefully in order to make the cookies turn out the way that you want. A chemist must also carefully follow specific procedures when he or she is attempting to synthesize new chemicals in the laboratory. While you read this book, you will learn about many different types of chemicals and chemical reactions. You will see how chemistry is a part of your life in many varied ways each and every day. This first chapter will introduce you to the basics of chemistry and the steps of the scientific method. 1.1 What is chemistry? Lesson objectives. Define chemistry. Differentiate between the macroscopic and the microscopic as it relates to chemistry. Know the relationship between pure chemistry and applied chemistry. Identify and describe the 5 primary disciplines of chemistry. Describe some of the concerns of the modern world in which chemistry has played and will continue to play a role. Lesson vocabulary. Analytical chemistry, applied chemistry, biochemistry, chemistry, inorganic chemistry, macroscopic, matter microscopic, organic chemistry, physical chemistry, pure chemistry. Recalling prior knowledge. What are some areas of science with which you are familiar? List some of the chemicals that influence your everyday life. Chemistry is a diverse and fascinating science that impacts our lives each and every day. In this first lesson, you will learn what chemistry is and some of the ways in which chemistry influences the modern world. A definition of chemistry. Science is a general term used to describe the principled, rigorous study of the natural world. Many interconnected disciplines fall under this broader concept. For example, physics is the study of motion and forces. Biology is the study of living things. Geology is the study of the earth and the rocks and minerals of which it is comprised. In this text, you will learn about the field of chemistry. Chemistry is the study of the composition of matter and the changes that matter undergoes. Matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. Virtually everything around us is matter, including both living and non-living things. Chemistry affects nearly everything we see and every action we take. Chemistry explains why the leaves of deciduous trees turn from green in the summer to various shades of red and yellow in the autumn, figure below. Chemistry explains why milk that is left in the refrigerator for too long turns sour. Chemistry explains why certain pollutants called chlorofluorocarbons have done lasting damage to the ozone layer of our planet. Chemistry is very much a central, foundational science, and a basic knowledge of chemistry is essential for students who are pursuing studies in biology, geology, environmental science, medicine, and many other subjects. Chemical reactions in the leaves of deciduous trees cause them to change color from green to red, orange, or yellow before dropping to the ground. Chemists are tasked with looking at the world in 2 ways, often simultaneously. The 2 worlds of the chemist are the macroscopic world and the microscopic world. Macroscopic refers to substances and objects that can be seen, touched, and measured directly. Microscopic refers to the small particles that make up all matter. Chemists must observe matter and do experiments in the macroscopic world and then use their observations to make generalizations and propose explanations that are microscopic in nature. For example, anyone can observe the physical change in appearance that occurs as an iron object rusts, such as a tractor that is left outside for a long enough period of time. However, a chemist looks at the rusting tractor and thinks about what is going on with the individual atoms that make up the iron and how they are changing as a result of exposure to rainwater or oxygen in the air. Throughout your study of chemistry, you will often need to switch back and forth between the macroscopic and microscopic worlds. Alchemy. Chemistry is a subject that has its roots in the ancient tradition known as alchemy, from which it derives its name. Alchemy was a combination of philosophy and science that had both practical and mystical aspects. The goals of alchemy were varied and difficult to summarize. In many ways, the alchemists sought to achieve perfection, through such actions as the pursuit of the Philosopher's Stone and the Elixir of Life, figure below. The Philosopher's Stone, it was believed, was a substance that was capable of being used to turn base metals, such as lead, into gold. It was also believed that it could be used to achieve rejuvenation and perhaps immortality. While alchemists did not ultimately succeed in these quests, their work provided the foundation for the modern study of chemistry. Alchemists laid the groundwork for many chemical processes, such as the refining of ores, the production of gunpowder, the manufacture of glass and ceramics, leather tanning, and the production of inks, dyes, and paints. Alchemists also made the first attempts at organizing and classifying substances so that they could better understand their reactions and be able to predict the products of their experiments. This eventually led to the modern periodic table, which you will learn about in a later chapter. Alchemy began to fully evolve into chemistry in the 17th century, with a greater emphasis on rational thought and experimentation and less emphasis on spirituality and mysticism. This painting by Joseph Wright, 1771, is titled The Alchemist, in Search of the Philosopher's Stone. Pure and applied chemistry. The study of modern chemistry can be split into two categories, called pure chemistry and applied chemistry. Chemists who study pure chemistry do research primarily to advance mankind's understanding of chemistry. Pure chemistry is concerned with a greater understanding of the theories behind how matter is changing in chemical reactions. Pure chemists tend to be less concerned with direct applications of the research that they are doing. That is not to say that pure chemistry can never lead to a real-world application, but, rather, that a potential application is not the primary motivation for doing the research in the first place. Applied chemistry is chemistry that is directed toward a specific practical goal or application. The line between pure chemistry and applied chemistry is not always distinct. For example, in the early 1960s, chemists at DuPont were searching for a new lightweight and strong fiber that could be used in tires. Chemist Stephanie Kwolek discovered, somewhat by accident, that a certain solution she had made displayed unique characteristics that were unlike those of other previously developed substances. The rapid expansion in the field of polymer chemistry that has occurred over the past 50 years was partially due to the results of her research. Polymers are very large molecules comprised of smaller subunits that are repeated over and over again in extremely long chains. The polymer that was discovered at DuPont was eventually given the name Kevlar. It is used not only in tires but also in bulletproof body armor because of its high strength and light weight. Polymer chemistry continues to be an active and vibrant field of chemistry, as both a pure and an applied discipline. Chemistry disciplines. The study of modern chemistry has many branches, but it can generally be broken down into 5 main disciplines, or areas of study. Physical chemistry is the study of both macroscopic and atomic properties and phenomena in chemical systems. A physical chemist may study such things as the rates of chemical reactions, the energy transfers that occur during a reaction, or the physical structure of materials at the molecular level. Organic chemistry is the study of carbon-containing chemicals. Carbon is one of the most abundant elements on Earth and is capable of forming a tremendously vast number of chemicals. Most of the chemicals found in living organisms are based on carbon. Inorganic chemistry is the study of chemicals that do not, in general, contain carbon. Inorganic chemicals are commonly found in rocks and minerals. Analytical chemistry is the study of the composition of matter, with a focus on separating, identifying, and quantifying chemical samples. An analytical chemist may use complex instruments to analyze an unknown material in order to determine its various components, figure below. Biochemistry is the study of chemical processes that occur in living things. Due to the importance of carbon-containing compounds in living organisms, biochemistry and organic chemistry are often closely interrelated. Nuclear magnetic resonance, NMR, is an analytical technique that uses very large magnets in order to learn about the specific makeup of complex chemicals. Pictured is a 900 MHz NMR spectrometer located in Birmingham, UK. In practice, chemical research is often not limited to just one of the 5 major disciplines. For example, a chemist might use biochemistry techniques to isolate a particular chemical from the human body, such as hemoglobin, the oxygen-carrying component of red blood cells. He or she may then proceed to analyze the hemoglobin using methods that would pertain to physical or analytical chemistry. Many chemists specialize in areas that are combinations of these primary disciplines, such as bioinorganic chemistry or physical organic chemistry. Chemistry in the world today. Chemistry has played and will continue to play a central role in all areas of science and technology. Before delving into the specifics of chemistry, it is worthwhile to examine a few of the frontiers that chemists are currently exploring and to review how chemistry has helped shape these fields. Energy. Virtually all chemical reactions involve a transfer of energy, and the worldwide demand for energy continues to increase every year. The majority of our energy needs since the Industrial Revolution have been met by the burning of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels, coal, petroleum, natural gas, were formed millions of years ago from the remains of plants and animals. Fossil fuels are a non-renewable energy source, meaning that they cannot be produced or regenerated, so the global supply will eventually be exhausted. Chemists are actively involved in finding ways to conserve energy and to utilize alternative energy sources. Nuclear energy is obtained by splitting large atoms such as uranium into smaller atoms in a process called nuclear fission. Nuclear fission releases tremendous amounts of energy, much more than burning an equivalent amount of fossil fuels. While nuclear energy is widely used to supplement the energy demands of modern society, it comes with risks and drawbacks. For example, nuclear power generates waste that is dangerously radioactive and difficult to store safely. Chemists are currently searching for better ways to store nuclear waste. Nuclear fusion, the process that occurs in the Sun and other stars, is an alternative that does not generate the same type of waste as nuclear fission. Scientists are actively trying to make nuclear fusion a practical source of energy. Biofuels are an alternative energy source that has gained a great deal of attention in recent years, figure below. Various types of biofuels are obtained from vegetable oils, animal fats, and the decomposition of corn or other crops. Although the use of biofuels lessens our dependence on fossil fuels, it still involves the burning of carbon-based chemicals, which contributes to climate change. This city bus is powered by biofuel derived from soybean oil. Finding alternative energy sources that are renewable and do not harm the environment is a primary goal for scientists working in this field. Renewable energy sources are those that either will not run out or that can be used over and over again. Chemists and other scientists are actively involved in the search for these energy sources and for ways to make their use widespread and practical. Solar energy involves the direct transformation of the energy from the sun into electricity by the use of devices called photovoltaic cells. Energy from wind can be obtained from the use of giant windmills. Wind power is an energy source that has been on the rise in recent years, with an increasing number of wind farms being built both on land and offshore. Geothermal energy is energy that is generated and stored deep within the earth. This energy source can also be tapped and used to generate electricity. Medicine. Advances in medicine over the last century have dramatically increased lifespans and improved our quality of life. Chemists are at the forefront of many of these medical breakthroughs and improvements. Medical researchers work with doctors to gain a better understanding of biological processes that occur in the human body. Today, thousands of prescription and over-the-counter drugs are available to treat everything from a simple headache to major infections, high blood pressure, depression, and a host of other ailments. Drugs work because of their interactions with other chemicals in the body. Chemists are constantly working to improve existing drugs, to design new and better drugs, and to further their understanding of the chemical mechanisms by which drugs perform their functions. Chemists are also involved in designing materials that are used to repair or replace body parts. Artificial hips and knees can be inserted into a person's body so that he or she can walk without pain, figure below. Burn victims benefit from replacement skin. Diseased arteries can be replaced with plastic tubing that must be able to withstand the harsh environment found inside a human body without degrading or malfunctioning. A prosthetic hip made of titanium, with a ceramic head and a polyethylene cup. Biotechnology is an emerging field that involves the manipulation of DNA, the chemicals that store the genetic information that gets passed on from one generation to the next. Genes are the pieces of DNA that contain this genetic information. Biochemists can transfer genes from one organism to another in order to take advantage of useful traits. For example, genes from a certain bacteria produce a chemical that confers resistance to certain crop-eating pests. Inserting these genes into the genetic material of corn plants results in genetically modified corn that is able to resist the pest without having to be sprayed with a chemical pesticide. Bacteria can also be used as chemical factories to produce useful drugs such as insulin, which is used to treat some forms of diabetes. Materials. Chemists are also involved in the design and production of new materials. Some of the materials that chemists have helped discover or develop in recent years include polymers, ceramics, adhesives, coatings, and liquid crystals. Liquid crystals are used in electronic displays, such as those found in watches and calculators. Silicon-based computer chips have revolutionized modern society, and chemists have played a key role in their design and continued development. Many chemists are currently working in the field of superconductivity. Superconductors are materials that can conduct electricity with 100% efficiency. Unlike conventional conducting materials, like copper cables, no energy is lost during electrical transmission through superconductors. Unfortunately, most known superconductors only exhibit this property at extremely low temperatures. A current challenge in this field is to design materials that can act as superconductors at normal temperatures. The environment. There is a great deal of concern about the deleterious effects that humankind has had and continues to have on the natural environment. The burning of fossil fuels pumps millions of tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, which means that it traps the heat from the sun and prevents it from being released back out into space in the form of infrared radiation. As a result, the temperature of Earth is slowly climbing. Chemists, along with environmental scientists, are searching for ways to slow or reverse the effects of global warming. One way, as mentioned previously, is to develop alternative energy sources such as wind power that do not emit carbon dioxide. Many other chemicals that were once commonly used were later found to be harmful to the environment, to human health, or both. The element lead was once a common additive to gasoline and to paint. Plumbing pipes were once typically made of lead. Only since the 1970s has the danger of lead become apparent. Too much exposure to lead can cause brain damage, and small children, who often chewed on objects painted with lead-based paint, are particularly susceptible to this effect. The use of lead in gasoline, paint, and plumbing pipes is now banned. Mercury is another toxic element whose use was once far more widespread than it is today, especially in many industrial processes. Chemists continue to look for threats to our health and the environment and to search for substitutes so that harmful chemicals can be replaced with equally effective but less harmful alternatives. Agriculture. The world's population has increased dramatically over the last century. It is becoming challenging to feed this population, since the amount of land available to grow food is limited. Even worse, the amount of usable land is declining as some of it is being converted to living areas. Chemists are involved in efforts to make the land that is used for agriculture as efficient and productive as possible. Some factors that decrease productivity include poor soil quality, lack of sufficient water, crop-eating pests, weeds, and diseases. Chemists are involved in the study of soils, including how to improve existing soils and to develop techniques so that soils do not lose their nutrients. Fertilizers are used to provide crop plants with vital nutrients, but the excessive use of fertilizers is harmful to the environment, particularly when the fertilizer runs off the land and into the water supply, figure below. Herbicides and insecticides have traditionally been applied to crops in order to reduce losses from weeds and insects. However, pesticides contain toxic chemicals that are potentially harmful to other organisms, including humans. Chemists are involved in developing alternatives to traditional pesticides so that the use of these harmful chemicals can be reduced. Biotechnology was mentioned previously as a way to increase the resistance of crops to pests. Pests can also be attacked by using natural chemicals to disrupt their mating and reproductive mechanisms so that the overall number of pests declines. Runoff from excessive fertilizer usage can cause an algal bloom due to the large increase in nutrient levels that causes algae populations to explode. Algal blooms are harmful to the natural processes of the aquatic ecosystem. Lesson summary. Chemistry is the study of matter and its changes. Chemistry is closely interrelated with other scientific fields, such as biology and geology. Chemists examine and explain their observations on both macroscopic and microscopic levels. Pure chemistry is devoted to the acquisition of chemical knowledge, while applied chemistry is focused on a specific goal. The 5 main disciplines of chemistry are physical, organic, inorganic, analytical, and biochemistry. Chemistry has modern applications in the fields of energy, medicine, materials science, the environment, and agriculture. Lesson review questions. Reviewing concepts. Which of the following scientific inquiries involve chemistry? For the others, what field of science is being described? How long it takes for an object to fall from a rooftop to the ground? How fast a flammable liquid burns? The amount of pollutants in a lake. The structure of a plant cell. The same event is described in 2 ways below. Which description focuses on the macroscopic level and which focuses on the microscopic level? Chemical bonds between oxygen atoms and hydrogen atoms are broken. When an electric current passes through water, a gas is produced. State whether each of the chemists below is practicing pure chemistry or applied chemistry. Explain. He is attempting to formulate a new adhesive that works well in extremely cold temperatures. She is studying reactions of the element sodium with different gases. Which of the 5 main chemistry disciplines is most closely related to each of the actions described below? Studying the digestion of certain types of foods. Investigating the iron content of different samples of ore. Measuring how much energy is released in a series of reactions. Attempting to produce a new carbon-based chemical. Measuring the amount of mercury contamination in a sample of river water. What is the difference between renewable and non-renewable energy? Identify the following energy sources as renewable or non-renewable. Fossil fuels. Solar energy. Nuclear power. Wind. Geothermal energy. Name a process that is involved in biotechnology. What are greenhouse gases, and why is their production considered to be an environmental problem? What are 2 alternatives to the traditional use of chemically based pesticides in agriculture? 1.2 The scientific method. Lesson objectives. Describe how the Renaissance period in history changed the approach to science. Identify the steps of the scientific method. Differentiate between the independent variable and the dependent variable in an experiment. Describe how scientists work in research groups and communicate their results. Lesson vocabulary. Control group. Dependent variable. Hypothesis. Independent variable. Scientific law. Scientific method. Theory. Recalling prior knowledge. How did the ancient practice of alchemy differ from the modern science of chemistry? What are the properties of a well-designed scientific experiment? Advancements in science are not always planned. Many groundbreaking discoveries in the history of science were made almost completely by accident. However, science follows a rigorous, time-tested process called the scientific method. By applying the scientific method, scientists can be ready for whatever results their research gives them, and many new and important discoveries can be made. Experimental science. It may surprise you to know that science is, relatively speaking, a very young subject. The Renaissance, which occurred roughly between the 14th and 17th centuries, was a time of great upheaval in Europe. The Middle Ages were dominated by a dogmatic approach to knowledge. The Renaissance ushered in new ways of thinking and great advancements in art, music, and culture. There also came a new emphasis on obtaining knowledge through the processes of observation and experimentation, as opposed to a reliance on older ideas that were based on a less rigorous scientific process. Two individuals who personified the Renaissance approach to science are Leonardo da Vinci and Nicolaus Copernicus. Many credit da Vinci with being the father of modern science. He is renowned for his observations and drawings of human anatomy, figure below. He also set up controlled experiments to investigate water flow, medical dissection, and the systematic study of movement and aerodynamics. Copernicus was an astronomer who suggested, based on observations, a heliocentric model of the solar system, meaning that Earth and other planets traveled around the Sunday. The prevailing doctrine had been that Earth was the center of the universe and that all celestial bodies must travel around it. Leonardo da Vinci was a Renaissance artist and scientist who made great advancements in the field of anatomy. Left, the famous Vitruvian Man drawing, right, a document showing the anatomy of the human arm. More than any one particular piece of knowledge, the Renaissance represented a change in the way human beings thought about the world around them. Emphasis shifted from a philosophical explanation of the world's natural processes to one that was instead based on observation and experimentation. The process of scientific discovery that we now call the scientific method originated during the Renaissance. This new method led to great advancements in the fields of astronomy, physics, anatomy, biology, and chemistry. The scientific method. The scientific method is a systematic and logical approach to the acquisition of knowledge, figure below. It uses specific techniques to observe and investigate natural phenomena. The scientific method differs from other methods of inquiry in that scientists seek to let reality speak for itself rather than approaching inquiry with any preconceived biases toward one explanation or another. The steps of the scientific method are: 1. Formulating a question, 2. Making a hypothesis, 3. Testing the hypothesis through experimentation, 4. Analyzing results, and 5. Developing theories or revising the hypothesis. The steps of the scientific method are easily represented using a flowchart. Formulating a question. The formulation of a question represents the first step in scientific inquiry. The type of question can be very specific or more general. Questions are often based on observations. For example, suppose that you observe that a lamp does not light up when you turn on the switch. The natural question is to ask why the lamp does not work. This in turn would lead to an investigation of the possible reasons why the lamp is not working. However, the process begins with a question that needs to be answered. Making a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a testable conjecture that proposes an answer to the question. A hypothesis for the non-functioning lamp could be that the light bulb is burned out. In order to be a valid hypothesis, it must be possible to test it. Testing the hypothesis and analyzing results. The light bulb could be easily removed and replaced with another one. If the new light bulb works, then the original hypothesis is confirmed. However, if the lamp still does not work even when the light bulb has been replaced, the hypothesis is now in question. Further experiments with more light bulbs could be done. Eventually, if the lamp continues not to work, the original hypothesis must be discarded. At this point, the scientist may decide to either make a slight change in the hypothesis or abandon the experiment entirely. Perhaps the change could be that there is a problem with the switch for the lamp that is preventing it from working. A new set of experiments could be performed to determine if the original switch was responsible for the lamp not working. The lamp example oversimplifies the usual process in a real scientific experiment. In most experiments, multiple experimental groups are created in order to test the effect of one variable on another. For example, suppose that you wanted to know how elevated air temperature affects the germination rate of a certain type of bean seed. You would set up multiple pots planted in identical fashion with the same bean seeds. You would establish experimental constants such as the amount of water and the amount of light that each planting would receive. The independent variable in an experiment is the variable that is changed during an experiment. In this case, the temperature is the independent variable. You would figure out a way to place each of the experimental groups at a different elevated temperature. One planting would be left at room temperature. This is called the control group. A control group is a group that experiences the same conditions as the experimental groups with the exception of the variable that is being tested. The bean plantings would be observed at regular intervals, perhaps every 12 hours. Data would be collected as to how many bean seeds germinated in each planting and when germination took place. The dependent variable in an experiment is the variable that is observed during an experiment. In this experiment, germination of the bean seeds is the dependent variable. In order to be confident about the results of an experiment, it needs to be repeatable. Professional scientists normally repeat experiments many times before they make their findings known to other scientists or to the public. Developing theories. If many experiments are performed and each and every one supports the hypothesis, it may be that the hypothesis can be accepted. A theory is an explanation that has been repeatedly tested and confirmed by multiple researchers and has gained wide acceptance. The term theory is one that is often misunderstood by people in the general population who are unfamiliar with the scientific method. Though a scientist may state that a theory cannot be proven correct, he or she is certainly not saying that it is in doubt. A scientific theory has generally been confirmed over and over and over again, although small details within a theory may be adjusted from time to time as new discoveries are made. In a later chapter, you will learn about atomic theory and how it has changed over the last few centuries. While the existence of atoms has not been in question for some time, new details about how the atom functions have resulted in many updates and alterations of the essential theory. Scientific laws. A scientific law is a statement that summarizes the results of many observations and experiments and to which there are no known exceptions. A familiar scientific law is the law of gravity. The force of attraction between two objects is dependent in a very specific way on the masses of those objects and on the distance between them. The law of gravity has been tested and proven countless times. Scientific laws often have a mathematical basis, though that is not necessarily a requirement. Scientific communication. Today's scientists rarely work alone. Rather, most scientists collaborate with one another in various settings as part of a group effort. The majority of research scientists work either for a company, such as the DuPont Chemical Company, or for one of many universities, such as the California Institute of Technology. Working as part of a group has many advantages. Most scientific problems are so complex and time-consuming that one person could not hope to address all of the issues by himself or herself. Instead, different members of a research group are each tasked with a particular small aspect of a larger research problem. Collaboration between members of the group is frequent. This occurs informally in the laboratory on an everyday basis. Research groups also typically have regular meetings where one or more members of the group may give a presentation to the others on the status of the research that they are doing. Progress normally occurs in small steps rather than grand, sweeping discoveries, and that progress is helped along by the teamwork that comes from working as part of a group. Modern scientific research is usually expensive. Lab equipment, chemicals, research space, and the upkeep of technical instrumentation all cost money. Research groups need to raise money in order to continue their work. For research done at universities, much of that money comes from government sources, such as the National Science Foundation or the National Institute of Health. Private companies can fund their own research, but they may seek outside funding as well. Scientists write grant proposals explaining the goals and projected costs of their research, and funding agencies make decisions about which research projects they would like to fund. The long-term viability of most research labs depends on the ability to get and maintain funding. Communicating results. Suppose that your research is a success. What now? Scientists communicate their results to one another and to the public at large in several ways. One is to publish their research findings in publications called scientific journals. There are many hundreds of scientific journals covering every imaginable field of science. A few of the major chemistry journals include the Journal of the American Chemical Society, the Journal of Physical Chemistry, and Inorganic Chemistry. Some journals have a very narrow scope, while others publish articles from many different scientific disciplines and appeal to a wider audience. Examples of the latter include the journals Science and Nature. Journal articles are often very complex and detailed. They must be accurate, since the research field as a whole uses these journal articles as a way to make scientific progress. Therefore, journal articles are only published after having been extensively reviewed by other professional scientists in the same field. Reviewers have the power to make suggestions about the research or possibly question the validity of the author's conclusions. Only when the reviewers are satisfied that the research is correct will the journal publish the article. This peer review process allows scientists to trust the research findings that they read about in journals. Scientists also communicate with one another by presenting their findings at international conferences. Some scientists are chosen to give lectures at conferences, typically about research that has already been published. Many other scientists at the same conference will present their work at poster sessions, figure below. These poster sessions are more informal and may often represent research that is still in progress. Scientists at a poster session. Lesson summary. The Renaissance, which took place in Europe between the 14th and 17th centuries, was a time of great change in thought and culture. Along with many other changes, science began to follow a more systematic approach based on careful observation and experimentation. The steps of the scientific method are to formulate a question, make a hypothesis, perform experiments, analyze the results, and develop theories. Professional scientists collaborate with one another by working in research groups and presenting their results in scientific journals and at international conferences. Lesson review questions. Reviewing concepts. What were some of the scientific contributions of Da Vinci and Copernicus? What is a key requirement for a hypothesis to be a valid part of the scientific method? Which of the following is not a part of the scientific method? Experiment. Hypothesis. Chance. Theory. What is the next step if a particular experiment is inconsistent with the hypothesis? Why do scientists repeat experiments? What is the difference between the independent variable and the dependent variable in an experiment? What makes a theory different from a hypothesis? What is a scientific journal and what is meant by the term peer review? Problems. A student decides to test the effect of added salt on the boiling point of water. He collects the following data, table below. What is the independent variable? What is the dependent variable? What is the purpose of the first experiment, when no salt was added to the water? What needs to be kept constant during the experiment in order for the results to be valid?